Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Greg Edwards. Greg is the CEO at Cryprostopper, which provides ransomware protection by automatically detecting and stopping actively running ransomware attacks. And they are the world's first digital security product to offer 100% ransomware protection. Greg, thank you for coming back to our Risk Management Show podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Boris.
Absolutely. It was great. We conducted our first interview with you last February, where we discussed some interesting facts about you and your company, and where you kind of shared with us some interesting facts and your experience with handling and fighting ransomware. And today we would like to discuss more kind of in deep topic about the current state of ransomware globally. So perhaps, Greg, can you share some your observation regarding the state of ransomware?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it hasn't gotten any better in the last little over a year, and continues to get worse. And the thing that I see continuing to happen that drives me nuts when I see it is remote desktop attacks on businesses. So utilizing they're even using the standard RDP port of 3389 and brute forcing in. And I've seen this happening. I think the first instance I saw of it was maybe 2007, and it's still happening today. And it's insane that people are not shoring up their at least that as a minimum of that remote desktop. So that's the number one thing that at least today is irritating me about cybersecurity and the risks that businesses continue to take, and not educating their IT departments about those simple risks. And then the more advanced ransomware attacks are continuing to happen with the organized groups since the Russian attack on Ukraine hasn't drastically affected the ransomware attackers, and if anything has upped their game. So the organized ransomware groups and ransomware as a service is still rampant. And so if you're not familiar with ransomware as a service, it's like software as a service, but with ransomware. So these more advanced organizations will create the platform in the background, and then they will recruit others to go and actually perpetrate the attacks. And then the ransomware as a service, they take a monthly fee, just like software as a service, and then they also take a percentage cut of the ransoms that they take. So on a global scale, ransomware has not gotten any better, unfortunately, and continues to be a massive risk to businesses.
And last year you said that because of rising popularity of cryptocurrency, there was also, you saw a rise in ransomware attack. But now kind of cryptocurrency is tanked regarding the valuation. Does it kind of affect ransomware world?
So, I mean, if anything, and this is anecdotal at this point, I haven't seen stats on it yet, but if anything, it's just going to increase their motivation to attack more, because any cryptocurrency that they were already holding devalued by, in the neighborhood of 75%. And it's not the ransoms aren't going down. They're just demanding more Bitcoin or more Ethereum or whatever cryptocurrency they're taking. And so the value of their cryptocurrency that they were holding certainly went down. But if anything, I see that as more motivation to go perpetrate more ransomware attacks.
And what average impact on businesses when they hit with by ransomware?
So I recently dealt with a retail chain that was hit by a ransomware attack. Roughly 800 employees across 12 locations. And this was an RDP attack, and they encrypted, this particular ransomware actually encrypted their entire VMware sessions. So their entire servers and those server images were encrypted and shut them down for several days. So that impact is huge and continues to be huge, where this company had good offsite backups, so they were able to recover, and I'm putting in air quotes, not that people can see that, but putting in air quotes, that it was quick, but still took several days to get back up and running, even with those good backups. And then just the aftermath of, are they out of the system? So forensic investigators were brought in and monitored for 45 days to make sure that they didn't come back. They actually, the attackers, then they didn't pay the ransom. And so then the attackers ran a DDoS attack against them, just as basically as punishment for not paying the ransom. So that impact is huge. And then, I mean, I could go on story after story of manufacturing companies, insurance companies, law firms, all hit by ransomware and taken down. And it's generally, and the unfortunate thing is that most of these smaller companies, and those are who we typically deal with, are thousand or less employee size companies, they don't practice their disaster recovery, and they don't have Cryprostopper installed, so the ransomware is running rampant when it hits them, and it's devastating. I mean, it's unfortunate to see in this day and age that companies A, aren't protecting themselves well enough, and B, don't have their disaster recovery in a place that they could be back up and running within a couple of hours. It's usually several days or even weeks.
So taking this last sentence, can you perhaps expand on how the companies can protect themselves from ransomware, from simple to more complicated, just the basic stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, number one, it's just about good hygiene. And what I mean by that is making sure, number one, that you have remote desktop closed and making sure that your firewall is properly protecting your network. And then number two is identifying and inventorying the devices that you have. So I come across so many companies that still don't have an accurate inventory of their laptops, desktops, servers, all of their equipment that has to be identified before you can take the steps of implementing cybersecurity. So then, I mean, then it's a matter of having managed AV, managed endpoint detection and response. Those tools are all becoming so much more affordable. So the advanced next generation endpoint detection and response, coupled with endpoint protection, which is next generation AV, and then tools like Cryprostopper to recognize an attack actively running, and then compliance. I mean, I really am a strong believer that there is a distinct difference between being secure and being compliant, but getting compliant, whether it's SOC 2 or ISO 27001, that increases the requirement to have better security.
So what would be, oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a mouthful of items, and,
no, for example,
and not exhaustive.
If we take someone who is like a risk manager who is just started to do like keeping an eye on his cybersecurity or ransomware, what first steps they have to take?
Well, I mean, that initial risk assessment, which is something that a risk manager is always going to do, but identifying what is the risk and the value associated with that risk to the company, so that you can go to the management of the company and build an appropriate budget. and educate everyone from the CEO down, but starting with the CEO on why cybersecurity is so important, and then establishing a budget that makes sense for the company based on the risk and start implementing it. And it's not something, I mean, if a risk manager is coming into a company that hasn't previously done this, it's not something you can change overnight. It really should be looked at as an 18 to 24 month process. And then at that last half of it, I really see SOC 2 as a good compliance initiative to get to in that first step. And again, in 18 to 24 months, it's not something you can turn on and get done. And you have to take the users into account and how it affects their day to day, and make sure that as these systems are being implemented, that you're educating and communicating to the end users.
Because I think last time you also discussed, we know that cybersecurity is everyone is talking about cybersecurity, but probably there are some issues that people cannot address, and they maybe some organizational issues. So what, from your perspective, something in the industry that you are kind of strongly disagree with, that people has to do something that they are not doing?
So something that I don't know that I strongly disagree with, something I strongly agree with, if I can change the question a little bit, would be implementation of two-factor authentication and single sign-on. So implementing that across as many of your systems as you possibly can, that is I mean, it's a huge benefit from securing the system. And I mean, still, one of, besides ransomware, the next biggest risk would be business email compromise. And I mean, we see that every single day, where someone's account, and typically through brute force, is being hacked. And the way that they're doing it now, because both Google and Microsoft have put at least better control. So if companies don't have two-factor authentication on their Google Workplace or their Office 365, they've at least put in triggers to stop the brute force attacks that are just, you know, hitting them hundreds and millions of times per day, to what these attackers are doing, and these script kiddies are doing, is slow rolling those attacks. So they may only be trying 6 attempts at a time, but they're just continuously and automating that process. So it may take them a few months to break a poor password, but they're still getting in. And so back to the original question, two-factor authentication is the thing that I strongly agree that is being promoted within the cybersecurity company or cybersecurity context. I can't think of anything that I strongly disagree with from a cybersecurity notion that's out there. And maybe the circles that I'm in, everyone is promoting zero trust, which I think zero trust is something that is really hard to attain completely, but something that we should work toward. So that's something I wouldn't say I strongly disagree with, but something that getting to zero trust security in most companies is nearly impossible, but something that we should be working toward.
Okay, makes sense, right? So for example, if we're finalizing this, if someone who is listening to this interview would like to take 1 or 2 major takeaways, what would it be?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing I think right now is education, and education of starting at the CEO level and down. Everyone has to be a part of cybersecurity, and so understanding how to go and present that. And as cybersecurity professionals or risk managers, you really have to learn how to sell that. I mean, that sounds counterintuitive, but you have to establish what is that risk to the business, what's it going to mean if a cyber attack happens, and then how do you mitigate that risk. And the CEO and the board of directors have to 100% be on board with that. And if they're not, and they don't understand the why you're doing the things that you're doing, and don't give an appropriate budget for it, then you should go find a new job. And there's plenty of those out there.
Absolutely. All right. So I ask this on my question, all my guests. So because I'm running global risk community, and we are kind of a community of risk managers and compliance managers all over the world. What do you think we have to do to better contribute to the process of this understanding this complex world of risk management from your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, I mean, there needs to be more information sharing. So not only from a risk management standpoint, but from a cybersecurity standpoint. So from the risk management side, I think that when there are attacks, that those need to be shared. And right now, that's not happening, especially in the US, in those companies under 1,000 employees. They are not sharing when they're hit with either business email compromise or a ransomware attack. There is no sharing of information because those companies don't want to divulge that. So we need I think a global system in place to be able to share that information, even if it's anonymously, but sharing those details about how did the attack happen, what was the impact on the business. And I think that is the next big thing that we need.
Okay. Last time we discussed, you mentioned that we discussed that you also helped in recover Iowa in recovering from land hurricane derecho. Is it something that happened this year?
No land hurricane this year, thankfully.
Okay.
Well, that was in August that happened in August of 2020. And so the community that it hit hardest was a community of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And it took out the town had lots and lots of old growth trees and very established neighborhoods and beautiful. Took out 75% of the tree canopy in the city. And that is still the visual effects of that are still there, but businesses have recovered, and for the most part, everything is back to normal. But that was from, that'll be 2 years coming up. And to paint that picture of what happened and what that looked like, it was 140-mile-an-hour sustained winds in the middle of Iowa, and it looking at the radar of the event in the clouds, it looked just like a hurricane. I live on a farm here in Iowa, and I was out walking my dogs, and we have about 60 acres, and I was up on the top of a hill. There was no warning of this coming because it came across the state so quickly and wasn't predicted to happen. I was out walking my dogs up on the top of a hill, and I could see this black wall cloud coming, and I started running for the house. And by the time I got into the house, the wind just started hitting and took down lots of trees. We were on a little bit further south edge of the biggest damage, so several trees down, but not 75% of our trees down like Cedar Rapids, Iowa took a direct hit.
You also are airplane pilot, right? Or sometimes when you fly, it's hard to be hit by a hurricane.
Yeah, you don't want to be flying in a hurricane. I was actually out flying this morning. I own a small 2-passenger plane and need to go keep current. So I was just out practicing and flying, and the days that I can go fly, it lifts my mood incredibly. So I was able to do that this morning.
I can imagine. Yeah, it's kind of taxi in Iowa right now. Okay, good. You have a good distances to practice, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And lots of here in the US, lots of small airports that we can fly to. There are, I don't know the exact number just in the state of Iowa, but at least 100 little airports that you can go fly around the state and around the country.
Yeah, totally great. Yeah. All right, Greg, thank you very much. Is there something that I forgot to ask you and you would like maybe to add to for our audience?
I think the only thing we didn't touch on is maybe just that balance between security and compliance. I'm a huge fan of compliance and a huger fan of security. And I think that though they're interconnected, but they are separate. And people need to understand that just because you're compliant doesn't necessarily make you secure. And certainly being secure doesn't make you compliant. So you really have to learn how to balance and marry those two things so that you can be compliant, whether that's SOC 2 or ISO 27001, so you can be compliant and be secure, and understanding that marriage between the two.
Okay, fantastic. All right, thank you, Greg, and I wish you and your company a great success, and hope to see you again in a few months to have some updates.
Would love to be back on. Thanks for having me, Boris.
All right, Greg. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.